Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is J.R. Moore coming to you live from deep in the mountains of the Missouri Ozarks. On Wednesday, the 11th day of September, year of our Lord 2019, welcome to the John Moore Show. We begin our show with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Prepper tip of the day, I want to make sure that all of you have all your team members, make sure they acquire body armor, helmets, and gas masks. Easy to get now, very easy to get, no problems. Once a crisis begins, well, it's simply not going to happen. You're not going to get your hands on any of those items, so the time to be getting those items is now while you can. Today, of course, is the day that we remember what happened on September 11th, 2001, when more than 3,000 Americans lost their lives. And we'll be talking about that off and on during the next 2 hours. And we have with us, patient waiting in the green room, my friend Professor James McCanney. Professor McCanney taught astrophysics at Cornell University. He taught mathematics at Cornell University. He's the author of, I believe, 11 books, an accomplished amateur archaeologist who consults with governments about his findings and his theories that he's coming up with. And, of course, weekly radio talk show host. Good morning, Jim.
Morning, John. And September 11th, 18 years after the big planned premeditated event that has gone uninvestigated to this day. So anyway, yeah.
Investigations have been prohibited. A routine dumpster fire in New York City gets a more thorough investigation by the New York City Fire Department than what happened following September 11, 2001. There was a gag order for the first responders to not talk about what they saw and heard that day. I don't know. I can only hope and pray that President Trump's second term of office, that he may actually do something. I won't believe it till I see it, but I know that nothing will happen, if it ever happens at all, before the second term. In the meantime, we have more than 1,000 engineering professionals who all have joined together to publicly state that what the official record says happened on September 11, 2001, defies all laws of physics and known capabilities of thermodynamics and building materials and so forth. It's a massive crime, still unresolved right in our face, isn't it, Jim?
Yeah, and not only that, but I was just listening to a lot of the interviews that have been done over the past number of years. One was done in September of 2016, right before the big election, the 2016 election. It was Bill Deagle. These are both friends of mine. Bill Deagle was doing the interview, and it was James Fetzer, another friend of mine, was being interviewed about his book dealing with some of the methods that had to have been used, and going through, as James puts it, weeding out the wheat from the chaff on the possibilities and the theories that had come up, that we had come up with. But the thing is, there's no question as to really who was behind it anymore. I mean, that looks very clear. But the point is, yeah, there has not been any investigation. And then you look into the wider scope of things, like the Oklahoma bombing. You look at the assassination of John Kennedy. I was just talking to a friend of mine, 40-year pilot with the flying commercial aviation, and he said he is certified on the 767 and other aircraft of that genre. And he said, well, yeah, what they said the planes did was absolutely impossible. It was not. It was way outside the window of possibility. So The other thing is we have allegedly four planes and not a single plane part in either the two buildings that survived or the one that was in Ohio that supposedly crashed into the ground or the one that came into the Pentagon. There's not a single bolt or nut or scrap of an airplane that's ever been recovered. So, this is like the I won't even use examples. It's in a class all by itself of some, these things are, in a sense extraneous. The fact is that who did this, we could pretty much put our fingers on, but there's a lot of accomplices, including the president, George Bush, his entire staff, the CIA, the Mossad, people within Saudi Arabia. I mean, they know very specifically names. So, and this is something that greatly affected the country, using it to start wars, to topple governments in the Mideast. The whole laundry list of everything that's happened is just criminal on a beyond global scale.
It is. And here we are 18 years later. We've been involved in continuous war these 18 years. President Trump's doing what he can to withdraw. I was really pleased to see him fire Mr. Bolton yesterday.
Hooray.
Yeah, that needed to happen. It really, really needed to happen. That gives me hope that other good things will happen as well. Many of us were disappointed when Bolton got appointed to that position, and now he's gone. The president gets advice that's sometimes not all that great, and that's probably what happened with Bolton's appointment. He got advice that was not well advised. But Bolton's gone. Bolton is a war-crazy war hawk, part of the New World Order, and he's gone. I would love to see, not that it's going to happen, General Mike Flynn put back in that position. What a kick in the teeth that would be to the New World Order, wouldn't it, Jim?
That would be. That absolutely would be. And that could be done, a pardon granted and put him back where he was, a couple of years ago. That, I had not even thought of that. But
I met General Flynn's brother at a fundraiser in Dallas, and I contributed to the fund, of course, to help pay for his legal defense. I also, his new attorney, Sidney Powell, I spent quite a bit of time talking to Sidney Powell in Dallas in a different event, and she's a brilliant woman. She knows her stuff, and he could not have picked a better person to be on his revitalized legal defense team. And so it's being publicly exposed now that the federal government was withholding exculpatory evidence from the court and from the defense. Now that's something you can't do. Lawyers lose their bar license, and lawyers are prosecuted for withholding exculpatory evidence. It's a very, very serious matter, and that's what the federal government was doing in this case. And I have high hopes that General Flynn will be exonerated completely, have his reputation restored, and he'll go on with his life. But we can only speculate as to how the president may respond to this exoneration. My speculation is that I would like to see General Flynn back as the National Security Advisor. That would just be wonderful.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's moving this entire ship that we call the United States is really a difficult job, and getting it moved in the right direction. And there's people that might disagree on certain things, but the overall direction, I'll be honest with you, my favorite topic, getting rid of NASA and all of its corruption. Trump is doing that in a very subtle way, but it's going to take some time. Yeah, it's a big.
Yeah, I agree. Now, following up on your statement there, Jim, Is it this whole new Space Force, new branch of the military? Is that part of doing away with NASA? Is the institution of a new branch of the military, the Space Force?
It's a subtle way. He's done a number of things. He actually, in giving NASA 100% of its budget when he did his initial budget cut, he cut massively into things like the EPA and every other agency in the government except NASA. But he gave NASA a 7-year hiatus and said, in 7 years, you will not have funding. And so that's why NASA is doing all this ridiculous, everything they're doing now, this tremendous 50 years Apollo thing.
Trying to impress everybody. Yeah,
yeah, and completely removing anything from YouTube or using Google. These are all CIA-controlled agencies, owned and controlled, Facebook, to get rid of anything that spanks of anti-NASA, information. And recently, I mentioned this last week, the guy named Bart Sibrel was completely demonetized this past week for saying NASA didn't go to the moon, and no other crime, available. He didn't swear, he didn't do anything that would break one of the rules, except apparently now you can't say anything bad about NASA.
Right.
And so we have science by proclamation. And
Well, I agree. Now, once we have a Space Force, wouldn't it be redundant to have, in addition to the Space Force, NASA? Wouldn't the mission statement of both entities be basically the same?
Well, NASA is supposed to be for peace, to go where no man has gone before, except they can't get a mouse where no man has gone before. So, and let me just put this very clearly. My official statement about NASA is that they have made a scientific claim that's unverified, but that's the official statement. But they cannot go to the moon now. That's a very fair statement, that NASA cannot go to the moon. They certainly can't go to Mars, and they're getting paid for pretending they can. So it's the sooner they can get out of there, the sooner our national heritage will be recovered, and the sooner we can actually start making progress as far as getting through the biggest problem of outer space is radiation, which nobody talks about.
No, they don't. Well, let's move on from there, Jim. Did we cover the 9/11 event? I don't know. Would you care to let the audience know where you were the morning of September 11, 2001?
Yeah, I remember specifically, although George Bush Sr. couldn't remember where he was the morning JFK got killed. I was in my kitchen, and I had a little white TV that a guy had given me. I'd never used it, and it sat on my kitchen counter. And that morning I woke up, and I said, I'm going to use this thing. I'm just going to turn it on. And I turned it on, and there's Brian, what's his name? Jennings. That was his name, right?
Right. Yes.
Brian Jennings. Sitting there with, and he's an evening news announcer. He's sitting there with his full suit, with a big screen TV behind him, with one of the buildings burning. That's where I came in. So the first building was already burning, and behind comes kind of sliding in out of the side, and he goes, very scripted, he goes, "Oh no, here comes another plane. Could it be heading for the second tower? Oh my goodness, it hit the second tower." And then after a little while he goes, "How long can these buildings stand this towering inferno?" And it's all scripted. And then how come Peter Jennings, was that his name, Peter Jennings?
I think so. Peter Jennings, right.
Yeah. Since when did he become an architect expert in how long a building would stand with the airplane fire going on the top floor? it was so scripted, it was unbelievable. But you asked, where was I? I was in my kitchen. I turned on this little TV that I had never used before, and there was the little black and white picture with Peter Jennings talking this script with the big screen TV behind him with a perfect vantage photo of the Twin Towers behind him on a big screen TV. So totally scripted.
Right. Well, Jim, I was also in my kitchen preparing to go to a memorial service for my very dear friend, my mentor, Mr. Charles Shaw. And a buddy of mine called me. He simply says, "John, turn on your television." And I did, of course, and I saw the first Twin Tower on fire, and then it went from there. It was quite a day. By noon, myself, my wife, my adult daughter, who was staying with us with her 3-year-old son, we had all the money out of the bank. We had all 3 vehicles loaded up, and I told the women, another attack anywhere in the country, and we're headed to our safe haven. And we set up a monitoring station on the dining room table for the next week, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, monitoring all the emergency frequencies as well as the commercial frequencies to stay up to date on what was going on. I walked around the neighborhood at noon and didn't really see much going on, but by 5 p.m., Jim, cars were lining up at the gas stations, several deep, and the supermarket was getting loaded up with people buying supplies. So we know from that experience how long it takes for people to react. It takes most of the day. If 9/11/01 is any example, it takes most of the day for people to start doing something of any consequence other than their normal activities.
Yesterday, John, I spent. We'll
hold that
catch
thought.
us after
Hold
the
that
break.
thought after the break. We'll be right back.
It's happening, ladies and gentlemen. We here at RBN are working with Front Sight Firearms Training Institute to bring our audience the best in combat, tactical, and defensive firearms training. Whether you're a private citizen who is new to firearms or you have a concealed weapon permit and want a level of training that surpasses what you've received from your local gun range, Front Sight provides priceless education and skills taught by seasoned law enforcement, military, and private citizen instructors to levels that far exceed law enforcement and military standard. With nearly 1 million responsible citizens trained from every town, city, and state from across the United States, Front Sight has bolstered the Patriot movement to a whole new level. Contact Dan Sutterfield by phone at 573-762-2356 or 573-465-2356 or shoot him an email at domedan, DOMEDAN, at hotmail.com. This is a limited time opportunity. Don't miss it.
All right, we are back. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 11th day of September. My website is thelibertyman.com. You'll see there a beautiful image of some couples in romantic settings. This is to get your attention for the John Moore Patriot Symposium cruise. We will be leaving Florida the 9th of February, Saturday the 9th of February, returning a week later, the 16th. Yeah, it'll be a Caribbean cruise. No hurricanes. The hurricane damage will be all repaired. Everything will be fresh and sparkling new. All of our ports of call. And it'll be a lot of fun. It will be a lot of fun. Get the details there at my website at thelibertyman.com. If you don't have internet access, give our cruise director, Betsy Murphy, a call. She'll be glad to mail you a full-color brochure. Her telephone is 636-530-9502. Visiting Professor James McCanney is website's linked to my links page at thelibertyman.com. Jim, tell people how they can listen to your 2 radio shows, if you would, please, sir.
Yes, John, every Thursday evening, 6 p.m. Central Time from WWCR Nashville, Tennessee. The James McCanney Science Hour at the Crossroad airs. And then also that re-airs many times throughout the weekend. Also available, the archives for free on my webpage. Then the paid cast, $3.95 per month, a little bit of pocket change, and you get an extra hour of deep dive into scientific topics. Right now I'm dealing with the educational package, so I'm dealing with a lot of very interesting topics that are not taught properly in school. So this is a 100-week session on education. So those are the 2 programs.
All right. Well, I encourage people to not only listen to Jim's shows, subscribe to the paid cast, but also buy all of his books. Yeah, it would be a lot, but these books have real science written in such a manner that you don't need to be a scientist to appreciate and understand them, do you, Jim?
Correct. And by joining the paid cast, you get great deductions on the entire library of my books. Books, DVDs, ebooks, CDs, etc. The Recalendar Sun Star Clock, my posters, etc. So you can get all of those at a greatly reduced price by joining the paid cast.
Yep. Well, people need to do that. They really do.
Exactly.
Okay.
John, yesterday I spent part of the day at one of our great war memorials and looking at all the details. One of the, you might call, fun facts of the presentation was that in World War II, an estimated 69 million people died. 50 million of them were civilian. But, the whole history of World War II and how it started, we now know that the official story, which they're still giving, by the way, as the gospel truth, we know that it's a complete lie. How long does the officialdom get to go on in this country, making it sound like everything was good and holy and proper? And you see the pictures, for example, of FDR. He looked like a coach that just won the Super Bowl when World War II broke out.
All right. Jim, I just ran across some very interesting information that gives me a lot of hope here. According to the ADN News, President Trump's done the following. This is draining the swamp. Department of Agriculture investigations, 280 indictments, 217 arrests, 272 convictions, 84.9 million in recovered monies. The General Services Administration audit revealed $329 million in waste and fraud, resulting in 97 prosecutions, 35 convictions, and $97 million recovered. EPA audit found $374 million plus in waste and fraud, resulting in 367 people being prosecuted. This is not making mainstream news at all, is it, Jim?
No, not a bit. Not a bit. On the same note of public trust, I sometimes scan CNN to see what kind of garbage news they're trying to pawn off on us. And they ran a story where the NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, otherwise known as the National Weather Service, is punishing one of their weather predictors relative to hurricanes about this issue where Trump said it might go into Alabama. And of course, NOAA came back and denied that, even though one of their own predictors predicted it, and the information is there. But listen to this quote. They say, now this is for an agency that doesn't have anything correct about predicting hurricanes. All of their theoretical work about what causes hurricanes is totally incorrect. Here's what they say: if the public cannot trust our information,
hold that thought. We got a break. We got a caller on hold. We're right back.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
My website is thelibertyman.com. There's lots there. There's a lot there. You could spend a lot of time at my website finding things that are backed up by real evidence. Very important. It's still summertime. Most Americans in this country, I would say, less than 1% have ever heard of the ultraviolet index, don't have a clue what it is. The EPA has a free service. You can put in any zip code in this country you like and find out what the ultraviolet index is for that zip code on that particular day. This is very important stuff. It's a matter of being healthy and not getting skin cancer. Very important. Also, on my website, of course, you'll find energy clinics for sale. This is my home business. I helped many hundreds of people get their lives back. If you have arthritis pain, if you have joint pain, if you're not getting a great night's sleep, well, quite frankly, you need an energy cleaner. I use mine every night. I wake up pain-free after a great night's sleep, and you can also. $285 shipping included to American zip codes. The mattress pads, they do vary in price depending on what you need. Twin size, full, queen, king, California king, the handy travel size. Everything's right there where you can use PayPal, MasterCard, Visa. You can call my toll-free order line 24 hours a day. Here it is, 800-592-9543. I say again, 800-592-9543. Visiting with Professor James McCanny, his website is linked to my links page at thelibertyman.com. Taking your questions, calls, and comments. Jim, we got a couple of callers on hold here I want to get to. First, we go to John in Texas. Morning, John.
Good morning. I have a question for Dr. McCanny. There's been allegations that not only was the collapse of the two towers and every other building in that complex, by the way, that is seldom mentioned, indicates that it was not any that, or some have proposed that that some kind of secret technology was used, some kind of directed energy technology was done to affect the very molecular structure of the buildings themselves, so that they disintegrated into dust. If the people were prompted to jump out and even exploded in midair as if they'd been microwaved when they jumped out. Could you comment on this, sir?
There are people who have commented on it. I probably refer you to those studies. The best one, like I said at the beginning, was James Fetzer, that has edited books on exactly these topics. But the end result is there's a lot of there are many engineers who are qualified to talk about that topic. So and it's a complicated topic. It's not like a one-liner that I'm going to review, like on a radio show like this. So that's where people should go for that type of information.
Did Mr. Fetzer have author a book on this, Jim?
He edited the book, and he's the head of authors or scholars for 9/11 Truth. There are also other groups dealing with engineers and scientists, etc. There's a number of different groups with similar names, but these books are edited and from scholarly articles dealing with these topics. So, and that's a complicated topic. It's not, like I say, a one-liner.
It is. Do you know the title of Fetzer's book offhand?
Yeah, it's, let me just quick look here.
It's F-E-T-Z-E-R, I assume.
Fitzer, F-I-T-Z-E-R.
F-I-T-Z-E-R, okay.
Yeah, it's something like America was nuked on 9/11. It was something to that effect. And the various technologies, some have been proposed, etc. I talked about this at the beginning of the show, that it separates the theories and some of the speculations that came out early in the life of this whole topic. But once again, this is a diversion from the real, academicians can argue about this or that, about how the buildings came down. That's a diversion from the real issue of prosecuting the people who did this.
It is. So, it is. It really is.
So that's the biggest answer that I can
John,
give
thank you for your call.
Yeah.
Our next caller is Jerry in Texas. Good morning, Jerry.
Good morning, John and Jim. Just the point of, I might have mentioned on your show, John, before, but in 1945, a B-25 crashed into the side of the Empire State Building. Did minimum damage. I think everybody that was in the plane was killed, and maybe a couple, three that was in the Empire State Building. Maybe I'm comparing apples to oranges here, but I think it's rather curious that it's not the first time an aircraft has flown into a building and haven't taken it down. I know, but I just thought I'd throw that tidbit out to those that may not be aware of that.
Yeah, once again, go back to the discussion or the idiosyncrasies of, what happened to the buildings. The real issue that everybody should be concentrating on is prosecuting the people that were involved in this. And there's there's potentially thousands of people. And
I agree. Yeah.
So that's the real issue. And I think we have to get away from the idea of how it happened or what happened or, was it this or that? No, we have to concentrate on pushing towards prosecution. The American people have been hijacked. The entire country has been hijacked since this event. And that has to be the concentration. And that's,
I agree.
That's the end of the story.
The reason I bring that out is, to make people realize that, hey, the explanation is not that simple. And I agree wholeheartedly. They had too many things in place with the Patriot Act and several things that's been discussed on this show and others that all of a sudden just happened to be available and passed. Look what they did in the banking industry. After that, would no longer cut checks because they didn't have canceled checks anymore. There's a whole list of things that came about with the 9/11 that people should be aware of and question. Did this really happen the way they said it happened? For sure. And if it didn't, who's responsible? Accountability is definitely, hey, we're accountable for our little meager actions. Why shouldn't somebody else be accountable for something like that? But thanks for taking the call, John.
Yeah, this week on my show, I have a very long list, and I'm going to be going through it, of all of the these diversionary tactics that have happened to sideswipe the American public. And it's a really, really long list. It really started with John Kennedy's assassination, and it opened up the door where these people became more and more aggressive and just blatantly doing all kinds of things. I mean, you can go back to the incidents at Waco, individual events that just rob people of their individual rights. And public events like this, also public shootings, all kinds of events. There's a very long list, so too long to go in this short time. The other thing is, like, we just had a very manipulated storm hit the Bahamas, and then you have total misinformation coming out of people who, and I'll say on the air some of the names, etc. But for example, there was an article published in I forget the periodical online, but there's a guy named Dane Wigington that's running around who is like a Johnny-come-lately. I call him the boy band of geoengineering, who's claiming that radio towers in Florida affected Hurricane Dorian. Complete misinformation. And he's being heralded as some kind of dean of geoengineering. And so what I want to point out is that there are controlled information coming from all sides at the American public. And this has to be exposed. The charlatans who are promoting themselves and being promoted as knowledgeable on just about every topic you can find, including outer space, science, weather, whatever it is, has to also be exposed.
Jim, I've got the title of Fetzer's book here. The title is America Nuked on 9/11. And then the subtitle is Compliments to the CIA, the neocons in the Department of Defense, and the Mossad, published in 2016. Jim Fetzer, Fetzer.
Right.
All right. We got a couple of callers on hold here. First, we go to Elizabeth in New York. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Hi, good morning, John. I just had some things that I wanted to throw out there about 9/11. I think Professor McCanney is absolutely right. I think a lot of it had to do with the missing money that Rumsfeld talked about, because that happened to be the very area that was hit at the Pentagon. But the other thing, okay, if the planes, if that was not a plane, if it, because everybody's saying that it wasn't, and even the ones that hit the Twin Tower, there was question as to whether they were truly planes or not. Luke Rudkowski had done a documentary called Loose Change, and he alleged that these planes landed elsewhere. And if that is indeed true, where are the people? Was that ever investigated?
There's a million questions.
And Silverstein was said to have taken out huge insurance policies on these Twin Towers. Jesse Ventura had looked into this, and there was thermite used. And part of the Twin Towers, part of the floors were abandoned, and it absolutely had to do with the Bushes.
Right, and you can include the Clintons in that too. I mean, go back to Oklahoma City bombing, and like I say, there's a long list of corruption and
absolutely
just unbelievable corruption. The Bush-Clinton cabal that almost continued. And one thing I'm working on right now is voter fraud with some people who I did the voter fraud study, mathematical study, regression analysis that showed that Hillary Clinton got 17 million illegal votes and still couldn't win. And how they're trying now to, for example, do away with the Electoral College because it's the only way the Democrats can win. At any rate, I could go on and on, but the amount of corruption going on today behind the scenes, and all in the name of justice and trying to paint it as something wonderful for you. This whole thing has to be basically exposed, and the people who are doing this. I could go on and on, to little things like they're saying, oh, everybody should have a college education. You know what that's going to do to a college education? It's going to make it absolutely worthless for the people who have earned college educations.
Jim, we're already at that point. I know a number of people who have 100 or more employees, And they can't trust a college degree anymore. They have to do their own independent testing for basic things just to make sure that the person is literate and even knows the alphabet. That's how bad it's become, and that's already here. We're already at that point.
Right. Yeah, but they will now want you to pay for everybody's college education, and you'd have professional students up to age 45 getting 3 PhDs and living in grandma's basement. That's where it's going. And people don't. It sounds so good. Oh, college education for everybody, it's free, but the end result is absolute destruction of the value of a college education. What's left of it.
That's very true. Our next caller is Paul in New Jersey. Good morning, Paul.
Hello, gentlemen. I agree with what Professor McKinney was saying earlier about the important thing is to pursue justice and start rounding up these people and have the trials and ultimately hangings for the perpetrators of 9/11. However, Professor McKinney, I see a bit of a contradiction in your claims concerning the use of radiation. Not that I subscribe to it, but you have said that you believe that from space they can use a laser to steer and trigger hurricanes. So if you could use radiation from space to move or manipulate hurricanes, why wouldn't you be able to use radiation in New York City to take down the Twin Towers? And I see that as contradictory.
I didn't say anything about radiation in New York City. I told you to read the authoritative books of people who are experts in that field. I didn't say a word about it. When did I say anything about that?
But do you think that you could use that radiation could have been used on those towers?
Don't tell me I'm contradicting myself. I referred you to authoritative studies on that topic. And as far as the use of laser satellites for guiding hurricanes and augmenting their energy, yes, that's part of my work. That's part of the work I did with Russian scientists in the mid-1990s, something that I happen to know an awful lot about and something that's very true, and something that's very much being obfuscated by people who are presenting completely bogus information, including our National Weather Service and other people who are being supported under the table to present false information, false leads, and claiming they're experts.
So Judy
but
Wood...
I didn't say anything about radiation from space, and in fact, like I said, so I'm not contradicting myself. I'm sorry.
No, but Judy, so you agree that what Judy Wood is saying could be have some
I
legitimate...
didn't say anything. I said I'm referring you to the authoritative studies by people who are expert in that field. So don't try and with my mouth.
Okay, he's not agreeing with anything there, Paul. Paul, thank you for your call. We got our last break. We'll be right back.
Republic Broadcasting Network depends on listener support of our advertisers and of our sponsors. We'd like to especially thank all of you who have taken advantage of our fundraiser with FrontSight Bonus. Those who are now FrontSight members, please train as soon as possible for your sake and for that of our nation. And please consider sharing your training and what you've learned when you arrive home. Republic Broadcasting Network has to stop promoting this fundraiser on air and on the website in just a few days. Dr. Ignatius Piazza, president of FrontSight, made a gracious exception to his no media rule for us at Republic Broadcasting Network. Thank you, Dr. Piazza. And once you've been to FrontSight, feel free to call your favorite host and share your experience on the air. We can continue this fundraiser without media help, but it'll be totally up to the listeners to spread the information. Please call Dan Sutterfield in Missouri at 573-465-2356, 573-465-2356. That's 573-465-2356.
All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 11th of September. I'm always fascinated, Jim, with people getting caught up in nuances of an event like 9/11/01 and focusing on things that are quite frankly not all that important, as opposed to who did it, which is what's really important. But that just seems to be human nature, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I just listened to somebody sent me another thing yesterday. I won't quote what it was, but it was academicians arguing over super fine points of speculation on a potential non-existent, but speculation on different types of technologies that might have been used. And they were arguing about pure speculation, that this could happen or that couldn't happen or whatever. And I thought to myself, talk about getting lost in the weeds, the duck hunter lost in the weeds, not being able to see the ducks up in the air. So, yeah, the concentration has to focus on taking people one by one. There was never any investigation. People were not questioned. The whole thing from beginning to end was scripted. And, clearly a lot of people, even though they may not have known what was going on, they were told what to do, etc. Of course, and that's where you start going down the rabbit hole, getting back to the real source. And then also looking at the immense amount of damage that was done to the United States and to countries around the world, and all the people who were affected by this. Absolutely unbelievable on a worldwide scale.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Well, Jim, we're down to the last two and a half minutes here. What do you want to get out to these folks this week?
I'd like to move on from this 9/11 thing also, but we do have to concentrate, and it's got to start at the national level. Or possibly it can start at the state level or other local levels where somebody breaks the code, so to speak, and starts to actually investigate. It could be done at local levels or somebody else because this was done in jurisdictions. Local laws were broken as well as federal and international laws.
Absolutely. Well, we'll do what we can to make that happen. Jim, I want to thank you for being with us as always, and look forward to having you back next week.
And hopefully my focus is on moving into the future. On a day like today, I'm not going to divert topics from this really, really important topic, but every day that's what I work on. Right.
Outstanding. Okay. Well, thank you, sir, and look forward to having you back next week.
Thanks, John. Take care, everybody.
We got a top of the hour break coming up here momentarily. We'll be back with Jeff Nyquist. We'll be talking about the International Communist Conspiracy. And, of course, we'll continue some discussion of 9/11/01. A quick comment on Judy Wood's book. I read her book. I've interviewed her on this show. The technology she discusses, we know it exists in a laboratory, but we don't know it exists anywhere else. Here's our break. We'll be right back. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 11th day of September. Purpose of the day, I want to encourage you to make sure, I remember your team has body armor, helmets, and gas masks. Easy to get now. Everything's working. The internet works. Credit cards work. The big, beautiful brown trucks from UPS. The big, beautiful white trucks from FedEx are making daily deliveries. Once a crisis begins, you can forget about getting those things. It's not going to happen. We appreciate you in the green room, my friend Jeff Nyquist. Jeff was a gentleman who began a quest more than 20 years ago to understand, comprehend, eventually become an expert, in my opinion, an expert in the true nature of the International Communist Conspiracy. His website is jrnyquist.com. There's a link on my website at the links page at thelibertyman.com. And we're going to talk about the International Communist Conspiracy and how it's hiding in plain sight. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, John.
Well, sir, I just found out that Nicaragua, there in Central America, has taken delivery of 20 T-72 tanks, and they're expecting delivery of 30 more T-72 tanks. Just what a Central American police, they're calling it for the police department, by the way, just what a Central American police department needs, isn't it?
Yeah, if they're going to invade Costa Rica, they'll need the tanks.
Costa Rica doesn't have a military.
No, of course
they
not.
have a real police
that's
force.
That's why they only need 20 tanks.
Well, they're going to take delivery of 50 total. Now, the Army and even the Marines, the military has ways of throwing into jobs temporarily. I had a temporary job at Fort Bragg for, I think it was 30 days, helping take care of the logistics for all aircraft and tank parts at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I found out very quickly that a tank would be deadlined and sit on the side waiting for useless, because a 5-cent washer that's a highly specialized washer was not in inventory and had to be acquired from wherever it came from. Point being, these large pieces of equipment like a T-72 tank, they need complex, expensive logistics. They need trained and qualified technicians to keep them running. It's a very complex, expensive matter to keep something like a tank running, isn't it, Jeff?
Oh yeah, gosh, it's the amount of spare parts and that are required to keep a U.S. Armored Division rolling is astonishing, because things break all the time, and if you go off the road, it's rougher, with vehicles, and they're tracked, and things can go wrong with their tracks, and if something goes wrong with the track, the tank is demobilized.
That's right. Well, that's why you see these tanks being hauled on flatbed trucks, because they simply aren't meant to be used very much without a lot of maintenance when they're rolling on their own on their own power. They are very high maintenance. I've talked to some of the collectors of military vehicles, and they all agree that even the World War II tanks, which are very simplistic compared to what they're selling now or using now, even they were very high maintenance. I would expect there's enough flatbed trucks along with the tanks to transport them all the way through Central America, up through Mexico to the southern border of the United States. What do you think?
Well, whenever you have tank formations in a modern army, you have tank carriers. Because when tanks break down, you have to have something that can carry them back to the shop. Or you have mobile shops. But usually it's, the Germans were the first to use, I think, in large numbers, tank carriers in World War II. And in fact, a lot of people don't know this, but the German military, the Russian military didn't have them back then. That was a shortfall. This is why the Russians were defeated by the Germans early in the war. The Russian tanks would break down, and the Russians had no way to retrieve their broken down tanks. So the Germans would pick them up off the battlefield, and they would replace their lost tanks with Russian tanks, which the T-34, for example, was better than the German tanks in 1941. So, tank carriers, I'm sure if they have tanks, if they're bringing them tanks, they're bringing them a tank carrier, of course.
Of course they are. Of course they are. And the technicians to keep them running, the routine shipments of spare parts from Russia. But these tanks are not standalone. They're part of a bigger picture of men and equipment and training and logistics and tactics, aren't they?
Yes, they are. The Russians have been helping the Nicaraguans build military bases. And, of course, Daniel Ortega, the communist, is in power down there again. He's changed the Constitution. The Sandinistas have really come back because, just as with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the supposed peace deal in Nicaragua after the Contra War was completely a fraud. They tricked us, basically.
Absolutely. Well, this is a part of a bigger picture. My Tuesday guest, Mr. Steve Ben Noon, he's confirmed through two independent sources what I got from my own independent sources, that the meeting that took place in Chicago of the leaders and their representatives from south of our border, that meeting did in fact take place. We still don't know what was discussed. It's a short list. None of which are good. And my personal belief is that they were making a decision on how to split up the booty, which would be real estate and three-dimensional items, which could be anything from pickup trucks to works of art to women. They were splitting up the booty between themselves at that meeting. I don't know if this invasion is going to happen, but I see all the pieces being. If I was going to invade the United States, I would be doing exactly what's taking place and putting all your logistics in place first. The dream of every general is to have complete logistics put in place properly, secretly, before the war starts, isn't it, Jeff?
Yes, it is. And of course, if you go back, I think even online you can find this, but if you go back, you'll find that the Russians, I think it was in the 1950s, they began mapping the United States very carefully. And they were mapping everything in the U.S. because their intention was to invade it one day. Of course, it's going to be the Chinese doing the invasion. Russians are going to invade Alaska and Canada. They might help the Chinese a little bit, but it's the Russians are mostly concerned with Europe and the Middle East. But the Chinese, they're building. If you look at the landing forces, they're building troop transport ships, a fleet of two kinds of troop transport ships, which have a 6,000-mile range. That's a very interesting, 6,000-mile range. Well, that takes them to the U.S. West Coast, basically. And they have a set of transports that fly helicopters with troops in them from the ships directly to the shore. And the other one carries vehicles and is like a landing ship.
Well, it's called roll-off ships, where the
right. It brings
they don't need a deep water port. All they need is a fairly decent beach. It doesn't need to be a wonderful beach. A fairly decent beach where they can just drive up, float up to the beach, open up that mechanism, and the vehicles drive themselves off and then up onto the roads and highways from there, don't they?
Yeah, and we don't know how many troops they could secretly, infiltrate Mexico with, or the U.S., to take over ports and airfields and fly troops in. They could directly fly in thousands of troops, given the size of their airlift capacity. And their sea lift capacity is huge because they, if you combine the Hong Kong shipping with the Chinese shipping, they have the largest merchant fleet in the world. Because after all, Hong Kong belongs to them too. And in that case, they could land, these Chinese ships are coming into our ports all the time. And what if they came into the ports like the Germans did in Norway, where suddenly they're coming in and they've got troops and artillery and armored fighting vehicles in these transports, and they can't take control of the port. So it seems to me an invasion of the United States is not something that's out of the question, especially when you have this suspicious activity. I think I think we've talked about The Silent Invasion by Scott Gulbranson, who was the reporter at the San Diego newspaper that had gone into Tijuana and befriended the Tijuana policeman, who talked about Russians and Chinese having a secret base in the desert, a commando kind of base, and how they were shipping weapons in through Ensenada, which is a port the Chinese control, and how they were getting them weapons past the border and even setting up arms caches inside the United States, military supply dumps. pre-positioned weapons. So that this invasion plan has been around for a long time. It is not something new. And when you go back to the military plans of the Russians in the 1980s, their plan was always to take over the United States. The plan of the communists, because we are the main enemy. And they believe that we have to be taken out. We cannot be allowed to exist, because as long as we exist, their existence is threatened just by the fact that we're here, because we represent freedom. We represent a different way of thinking about life than they give to their own people.
We represent a place where the best and brightest citizens of their countries who want to have a fun, full, happy, productive life want to go to instead of where they come from, which is the communist countries.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, that speech that I think you put it up on your site by Chi Hao-chen, the Chinese defense minister, talked about, the possibility that they would have to kill millions of Chinese here in the United States that were living here, and saying, well, they've been corrupted by bourgeois liberalism. I mean, those are the words he used, corrupted by bourgeois liberalism, and we would have to do a campaign to, correct them. And, of course, then he cites all these campaigns in which millions of Chinese were killed in China. And so he's saying, well, we'll have to, kill a lot of them because they're not going to work out for us. We're going to have to reform and re-educate them the way they re-educate in China through the Lao guy. And it's interesting to see a speech like that where they're practically, and he said, well, we're communist humanitarians, we don't like killing people, but let's be honest. He says, the future depends on killing. He said something like progress of humanity depends on killing. Whenever there's a lot of killing, there's progress. And it sounds mad, but it really is how they think. That sort of thinking is built into communist theory.
It is. It's part of what they believe. It's part of who they are, and there's no escaping that, is there?
No, and that's the thing that I think people have the hardest time believing that there are people like this who think so differently than they do.
It
realize
is.
That, it's hard to understand.
It just bounces off our Western brains. These mindsets are so bizarre and so freakish that they bounce off our brains as not even being possible.
Yeah, but and this is why it is important to read defectors and to study what they themselves say. And when you read Karl Marx, Karl Marx says a lot of these things. So it's like, well, they're not really departing from the master. Their dark master said these things a long time ago.
That's right. Well, we've got 13 months till the election. The people I consult with hope we have 13 months before hostilities begin. There's no guaranteeing either that we have 13 months or that they will begin at all, on one hand. On the other, it would be prudent to prepare in advance, wouldn't it, Jeff?
It would, and of course, if they are going to proceed, they're going to start with an economic attack to soften us before the actual physical attack. That's what all the basic sources basically say. They want to create a crisis here in the United States. And they want that crisis to also cause political, people to become upset with the government or with each other, and they'd like unrest in the streets. And of course, you're hearing from the left, if Trump wins, they're gonna riot or they're gonna go berserk. You could expect some unrest, and we don't know how contentious this election upcoming is going to be.
Well, we don't.
We know that
we don't. Along the lines of what you just said, Jeff, there's a film it's a film meant for Christian audiences. It's being released next month. Mm-hmm. Has a real simple two-word title. I've watched the trailers. It looks like a great film. The title of it is The Reliant. The Reliant. And it deals with a fast-moving economic crisis, and it focuses on a Christian family working to stay together and survive the crisis. So I'm looking forward to seeing it, and I encourage people to look at it also.
There was an interesting, that you bring that up. There was an interesting interview by Miles Kwok, the Chinese billionaire who has defected, who knows the top leadership of China. And it's fascinating because he says that basically the Chinese economy is a fake, and that he acknowledges that they want to destroy the United States. And he says that because of the way they've arranged their economy, they have 2 years before their own economy caves in.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back.
Tired of being lied to by mass media? It's growing more and more apparent today that news is received less and less through standard media outlets. Even with a growing audience every day, RBN is beginning to direct more efforts into social media. Social media and the use of the internet is fast becoming the primary source of people for news, regardless of demographic. RBN has set out to provide some of the best news on the internet through republicbroadcasting.org, and also has begun to use the tools to our advantage by way of social media. Republic Broadcasting is now operating a Facebook page to function as yet another avenue to have our collective voice reach new audiences across not only America, but across the globe as well. The Facebook page features not only news, but also an RBN player to listen to our broadcast. Get involved by visiting facebook.com/Republic Broadcasting and liking our page and share it with your friends and family, because you can handle the truth.
Back, ladies and gentlemen. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 11th of September. Despite all the news, it's not so good, but we got good news. We're going on a cruise. Life doesn't stop just because there's bad news. No, life goes on, and relationships go on, and friendships go on. And on this cruise, we're going to have fascinating conversations. Myself, I'll be there, of course. Leon Green will be there. We're really hoping that Sam Andrews and his wife will be there. That's not firmed up yet. No, that will come soon, I hope. It'll be a lot of fun. It will be educational. It will be romantic if you choose it to be. Some great photographs there of couples having a romantic time there on a cruise ship at my website at thelibertyman.com. Get the details right there, and you can sign up to go on a cruise right there. You can call our cruise director for more information, or to have her mail you a beautiful full-color brochure. Betsy Murphy, her telephone number is 636-530-9502. I say again, 636-530-9502. Visiting with Jeff Nyquist. His website is jrnyquist.com. We're taking your questions and calls at 800-313-9443. Let's continue, Jeff.
Yeah, well, with Miles Kwok, he did this interview where he was saying that the Chinese economy was a fake, that it was made especially to basically steal resources from the West, and that it was hollow at its base, that it's basically based on a kind of stealing, and of course he said in about 2 years, because he described the workings of the Chinese bank, the Bank of China and other Chinese-controlled banks. That is, they don't really operate like a real bank, and they haven't. It's sort of like a resource for the Chinese Communist Party and its operations overseas. And so, because it's treated not like a bank, and its bookkeeping is very loose. And because there's corruption, but also because the funds are being used for strategic reasons, it's basically insolvent. Their whole banking system is insolvent because, after all, they're not capitalists. They don't take capitalism seriously. And he said that their economy, their financial system, is going to cave in about 2 years. And what's interesting to me is that if you had built your system merely to support an attack on another country, that is to take out America, why would you need to worry about what it was going to be like in more than 2 years if you were going to attack in a year? I found it kind of interesting the way it dovetailed with your information about this meeting in Chicago, because if the Chinese weren't doing all this to attack us, they better think about it now, because the Chinese Communist Party is going to go down the drain if they suffer the economic shock of a real financial collapse.
Well, it fits. You're right. This information fits hand in glove with the information I'm getting from my private sources, verified from other private sources. The Chinese leadership are very bright men and women, and of course, they think decades in advance. The plans that are about to come to fruition have been in place for decades, both on the part of the Chinese and the Russians, haven't they, Jeff?
Yeah, and it's interesting in this choice of timing for doing a war. Russia also has trouble. I think I've mentioned that the Russian economy, which doubled between 1998 and 2013, since 2013 it's declined by about 35% of its high in 2013. So it's and this is because of overinvestment in the military sector. They've been building their military at the expense of their regular economy being able to maintain itself. And this is something that, by the way, Nazi Germany did, which got Hitler into trouble, and it was why Hitler became so aggressive starting in 1938. He knew that he was facing an economic crisis because of the way the Nazis had overspent on armaments. And of course, the German economy had not recovered from World War I and the Great Depression yet. It needed more time. So as small as the German military seemed at the beginning of World War II, it was way ahead of everybody else's. As we saw, they took over all those countries near the beginning of the war.
Right. Well, all those other countries were prepared, very well prepared to fight World War I all over again with World War I tactics, equipment, and so forth, and weapons. But the Germans weren't fighting World War I all over again, were they?
No, their theory of war had made advancements, and it's true that weapons aren't always the decisive thing, but it's whether you have the right doctrine, the right training, the right concept of how to carry on a war. And it seems to me that the Russians and Chinese have been totally concentrated on the concepts of war and preparing a war, right down to the deception that the American president is somehow a Russian agent and promoting that through their agents here in the U.S.
Hold that thought. We got a bottom of the hour break. We'll be right back.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. We have a special promotion going on at Republic Broadcasting. This is a fundraiser for Republic Broadcasting involving the Energy Cleaner. Mail me a postcard. My address is at my website at thelibertyman.com. We pick a postcard every other Thursday. When your postcard is drawn out, you get to buy an energy cleaner for $215 instead of $285, $70 discount. $200 goes to Republic Broadcasting. You also get a 10% discount on my mattress pads. So get those postcards in, put your name, your telephone number, your email address on there, and when your postcard is drawn, you get to get an energy cleaner for $215 instead of $285. Mattress pads, 10% off. Help us out at Republic Broadcasting and help yourself to get an energy cleaner at a deep discount. It's a win-win situation for everybody. We hope you can get these postcards in soon. Thank you very much.
It's happening, ladies and gentlemen. We here at RBN are working with Front Sight Firearms Training Institute to bring our audience the best in combat, tactical, and defensive firearms training. Whether you're a private citizen who is new to firearms, or you have a concealed weapon permit and want a level of training that surpasses what you've received from your local gun range, Front Sight provides priceless education and skills taught by seasoned law enforcement, military, and private citizen instructors to levels that far exceed law enforcement and military standard. With nearly 1 million responsible citizens trained from every town, city, and state from across the United States, Front Sight has bolstered the Patriot movement to a whole new level. Contact Dan Sutterfield by phone at 573-762-2356 or 573-465-2356 or shoot him an email at domedan, DOMEDAN, at hotmail.com. This is a limited time opportunity. Don't miss it.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 11th of September. Related to our discussion here at my website, we do have the full translation, the complete text of the top Chinese military general, a speech he gave to his own people. He never thought this would ever get away from him, get released, become to the attention of the American public. But that complete translation is there for you to read it and comprehend what their goals are at my website at thelibertyman.com. Very important stuff. And down from there, where it says Red Dawn, we've got the 2 shows done, one by Jeff Nyquist on the 22nd of May, the next following day, Command Sergeant Major Dan Page on the 23rd of May this year. Learn about the nature of the Russian invasion. A couple of really important things at my website at thelibertyman.com. In addition, in normal times, you want to be healthy and have great rest and be pain-free. In hard times, like what might be coming at us, it may be a matter of life and death to get a great night's sleep and wake up pain-free. That's where the energy cleaner comes in. I would not leave home without it, and I would encourage you to check it out, see if it fits your needs. If you have arthritis pain, joint pain, back pain, it will. Are you not getting a great night's sleep? It will. Only $285 shipping included. Yes, I do offer a 90-day money-back guarantee. Getting a fresh shipment from my friend Tom Bearhill today. And check it out at my website at thelibertyman.com, where you can place your order using PayPal, MasterCard, Visa, or you can send me a check or money order. My address is right there. And you can call my toll-free order line 24 hours a day. Here it is, 800-592-9543. I say again, 800-592-9543. Visiting with Jeff Nyquist. His website's jrnyquist.com. There's a link on my links page. Jeff, I've been reviewing this thing and aware of the communist threat. When I was a boy, I would have been in junior high school. My mother took me to the church we attended, the Baptist church, to listen to an audio presentation at the church about the true nature of the communists and their goals. And so I would have been in junior high school. That was my first awareness of the communist threat. And I've never been as concerned as I am right now with what their goals are and their chances of achieving their goals. How about you, sir?
Yeah, it's scary, especially what really bothers me is the way that they have gotten a foothold inside our own government and our bureaucracy how we've elected presidents like Obama, how they brought people into the intelligence world and the military world. I wonder why they promoted certain people, why Obama staffed the bureaucracy with certain people, and what it is those people really have in their minds. It worries me because we had this happen. It's very well documented how the communists got into the Roosevelt FDR administration in the 1930s and 40s, and what they did to us during World War II. How they worked to get us into the war, and how they worked to get us to give the lion's share of the spoils in Europe as much as possible to the Russians, and how many American lives it cost.
That's right. Well, there was communist infiltration of German communists into the Abraham Lincoln administration also, weren't there?
Yeah, the communism has been around for a long time. People don't realize exactly how long it's been around. And, of course, communist ideas, I saw some statistic, I didn't check it out, about how many mayors at the turn of the century, from the 19th century to the 20th century in America, something like 600 mayors had socialist ideas in the United States. Now, I mean, how many small towns are there? Well, a lot more than 600, but that's still a large number to show that if you go to, there's an American sociologist, Charles Graham Sumner. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was alive,
I don't think I have, no.
Around that time. Yeah, 1890s, early 1900s, and he used to joke about how socialism was becoming popular in the U.S., and his advice to people was, well, get on the committee. Of course, committee means Soviet. It has the same meaning. And
right.
I think
right.
There were people like Gustav Le Bon who wrote the Psychology of Socialism and the Psychology of Revolutions, who was also worried in Europe. He was a Frenchman about the popularity that socialism was gaining at the time. So I think, even as Marx and Engels wrote in the Communist Manifesto in 1848, a specter is haunting Europe. It is the specter of communism. This has been a problem for a long time. And it's morphed so that now it encompasses, feminism and gay marriage and multiculturalism. It is developed weapons, new ideological weapons, and environmentalism too, which sound good on the surface, but which are also very destructive in what they actually do and what their objectives are. So it is quite a subject.
It is quite a subject, and in the absence of reading and studying, people will be hopelessly lost to really understand the true nature of this threat. And if you don't understand the nature of the threat, you can't really fight against it, can you?
No, you can't, because it's very subtle. I've been reading Chinese, a little bit of Chinese text translated into English. There's a fascinating book. It's called The Tao of Spycraft, and it's I'm not remembering the name of the author at the moment, but it's about the history of Chinese espionage and the development of their strategies. And the idea of I read just the other night that the idea of the false defector could be traced back to 19th century BC China. The Chinese history and the dynastic wars and the period of what they call the Warring States, the most sophisticated and subtle ideas of how to take over other countries were developed. And of course, China became this empire that's still with us today. And people don't realize China isn't as much a country as it is a very old empire, in which many different people were brought together under that empire. And that empire was successful largely because it developed very sophisticated strategic ideas, and that's what their culture, a lot of Chinese culture, especially ancient culture, is embedded with this strategic literature. And Sun Tzu, Han Fei-tzu, and other more minor writers, the writers who wrote commentaries on them.
Well, I just have to repeat myself. In the absence of knowledge of their tactics, of their history, of how they accomplish their goals. We're really fighting with blindfolded, aren't we?
Yeah, and when you read about these strategies, which, one of the things Sun Tzu says and Han Fei Tzu emphasizes is that you send out spies, an army of spies, and you infiltrate and you try to get to the top of the other guy's power structure. And so that you are basically the guy sitting at the elbow of the enemy king is your agent. That's what you do. And it's decisive, because with that kind of influence over the enemy camp, you cannot fail to lose. And of course, Sun Tzu has a saying. He said, if you don't know yourself and you don't know your enemy, you will lose every battle. And then he goes on, he said, if you know yourself and you don't know your enemy, you'll win half your battles. But if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you'll win all your battles. And how do you know your enemy? How do you know yourself? And these are very deep questions, really. I mean, they've brought strategy to the level of philosophy, where you're asking very deep questions and you're operating at a very deep, subtle level. And it's not that the Chinese are good in the sense that their philosophies have made them good, but they've made them strong. And it's you mentioned the speech by Chi Hao Chen. He says at one point in the speech, he said, well, the cruel, in Chinese history, the cruel have always prevailed over the benevolent. And then he expounds on how cruelty is necessary for victory. And it's remarkable for an American to try to wrap his mind around this as a political philosophy.
Well, that's reality. And if you don't recognize that reality as being exactly what it is, you're just going to be a victim, aren't you? Jeff?
Yeah, you can't beat something if you don't understand it. You can't. I think that's very true. Unless you understand your enemy, you can't prevail. And imagine going into battle with somebody and you don't know what their force structure is. You don't know what kind of armies they have or what kind of weapons they have. Well, how do you know what to do? If they know all your weapons, they can plan to meet you and defeat you, but you're helpless. And that's why the secrecy, the fact that we're spied out and that we don't have good intelligence about them because they are so secret. And
that's right.
If we think about how dangerous it is that our own intelligence agencies are basically, in effect, pointing a finger at the president of the United States. I mean, if you wanted to destroy the United States, you accuse a president of being a traitor, but the people that initiated this whole Russia-Trump collusion story are themselves Marxist, socialist people who have a track record of working with the Chinese and the Russians. Well, it's pretty obvious when you really look at it, like in Diana West's book, The Red Thread, in which she connects a red thread to all these players in the Trump-Russia scandal, people who are accusing Trump. And she's got that Ed Baumgartner quote that she's got in there. This is a guy that works for Fusion GPS or worked for them, and he's basically saying, oh, yeah, the Russians aren't really, Putin's not a conservative, Russia's not a conservative place. It's wonderfully far from, and so it's clear what a guy who kind of, leans very far to the left is praising Russia. He means Russia's still the motherland of socialism in the world, and that we've been deceived. And so they even know, many of them know what the real game is.
Well, Vladimir Putin wears a Christian cross in public when he's being photographed frequently. It's all part of the deception, isn't it?
It is very much a deception, and we are so simple in this country because we believe in being straightforward, and it's hard for us to believe that people are going to predicate themselves on destruction, we find it hard that they will predicate themselves on lies to the extent that they do. But really, Russian and Chinese politicians, they lie in principle because telling the truth is what's shameful to them. Because if you're telling the truth, you're probably doing something stupid in their view. Because you never let your enemy in on anything. You want him completely confused and deceived. And for that to be effective, you want him to be so clueless that he doesn't have any idea of what to do whatsoever.
Absolutely. I could not agree more.
Yeah.
Well, a good starting point, ladies and gentlemen, is to go to Jeff's website, jrnyquist.com. Start reading his articles. You're a big fan of Diane West. How many books has Diane West? She just had a new book come out, and you wrote a review of that, didn't you, sir?
Yes, I did. It's on my webpage. I also have started a new little. I like the WordPress format, so I've got a WordPress web that I'm going to be posting on, and I do a review of her book, and I think it's very important. I encourage everybody to read it.
Well, that would be a good thing to do, and time's a wasting. You may think, well, we got 13 months. I don't have time to read a book. Well, make the time. Make the time. Just turn up the TV, read a book, educate yourself, because this information may very well be a matter of life and death, couldn't it, Jeff?
Oh yeah. We definitely need to. We definitely need to figure out what we need to do as individuals, because, I mean, maybe we'll dodge the bullet. Maybe their situation is so bad that they can't actually do what they want to do, because, as communists often do, is they miscalculate. They have these grand strategies, and they aren't able to follow through on them as they like. But what I would say is that we can't count on them messing themselves up.
No, we can't. Their plans have been very carefully laid for decades in advance, and they've got backups on the backups on the backups, because they know things go wrong. That's just the way any project's going to go.
And
they know
by the
things
way,
going to go wrong.
You notice that Bolton is gone. And this is the changing out of the national security. This is a very interesting thing because there's real reason for this. Because if there's new strategic information out there, and I believe there is, and Bolton has had the wrong advice, I think, in a number of areas, that this development could be very positive, depending on who we get. But I think we might get somebody very good. I'm hopeful.
I'd love to see it be General Mike Flynn, quite frankly. Wouldn't that be a kick in the teeth to the New World Order?
Well, I'm hoping it's friends of mine, at least. It's somebody that knows the score. And of course, Trump is a person who's been searching for the truth, I think, about what's going on in the world strategically.
He has, and he gets bad advice. He figures out he's got bad advice, and he makes a correction, doesn't he?
Yeah. He's a very intuitive person, and I think he knows. He tries things out, but he knows when he's run into something that isn't the real deal.
Hold that thought. We got our last break. We'll be right back. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 11th of September. Jeff, this hour has just flown by, as typically they do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 13 months until the election. 13 months will fly by also, and we'll be there at November 2020. And those who are prepared in advance, they will be ready. They'll have some peace of mind. Those who have not, well, they're going to have the consequences of that, won't they, sir?
Yeah, they will. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
It will be. It will be. And I advise people make prudent preparations. Fit it within your budget, fit it within your schedule, fit it within your abilities, and you're not going to turn yourself and your family into a Delta team. That's not going to happen. You're going to prepare to survive what's coming at us, and keep a low profile. I'm not encouraging people to go to war against these enemies, just to get out of the way and survive in a remote location, preferably a hobby farm. Intentionally going to war against these people is probably not very wise, is it, Jeff?
No, because they're the ones choosing the time. And they've chosen this time. We've had, the things that were done to our military in the 8 years of Obama were very destructive to our readiness. Now, Trump has done a lot to change that, and maybe it's making them hesitate. But imagine if Hillary Clinton had been president, how much
her job was to finish out. She was the finisher. She was going to be the finisher, but I would include both Bushes and Clinton in what was done to our military to have adverse impact, because all those presidents did things that were harmful to our military, and from what I know. How about you, sir?
Yeah, well, there's just the readiness, the ability for the aircraft carrier battle groups to train, the ability to have a bigger budget so people could get the training, so we could have the readiness levels that we need, and to have the weapons that we need. I know that we've been intensively working with the Japanese to develop weapons to defend, and the Japanese have great technical and industrial capabilities. You have to credit Trump for his closeness to the Japanese Prime Minister, because Japan is probably, in real terms, the second largest economy in the world, and so they could make a very big military very quickly, and they've been making preparations. I don't think we know all that they've been doing.
Well, Japan knows that if we go down, they're next, don't they?
Yeah, Japan is directly in China's crosshairs.
Of course,
and the country that the Chinese want to take down. And of course, the Chinese public is given a constant, steady stream of anti-Japanese propaganda. It's as if World War II never ended.
That's right.
If you look at the Chinese media in the way it depicts Japan.
It's a shame, but it's true. Jeff, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. We'll have you back next Wednesday.
Hey, thank you.
Okay. That's it for the day. Get medical supplies, your energy cleaner, your essential oils. Now let's can fun. Everything. God bless you.